Hello and welcome to basically the first proper lesson on this channel for playing the banjo. The first lesson that I did is kind of a lesson 0, just kind of explains some of the basics, the very basics of it, and I don't really go through how to actually play the banjo in that at all. So these videos are going to take it super slow, bit by bit, and they're going to be quite short. Really what I would recommend is taking the kind of exercises or tips or general point of each video, going away with it for maybe a few days and then going to the next one. I think it's best to really take our time with it. So if you do end up going through all of the lessons I'm going to put out here, you'll probably find that the advice I'm giving changes a little bit as we progress. So when we start off the technique, we will start quite sloppy with quite big motions, and then we'll refine it over time. I think that's the best way to learn clawhammer banjo, rather than learn how to be super accurate first. So yeah, if you do find that happening, I'm doing that on purpose. I know what I'm doing. I'm not just talking rubbish. But if you do notice those inconsistencies, that's all it's going to be. So let's just start really basically. We're just going to start in this lesson just with the right hand. All we're going to do is learn the basic downstroke and pluck. It's going to be really simple. So firstly, banjo is tuned to a G chord. If you play that and it sounds a bit rubbish, you're out of tune, basically. So always make sure you're in tune. Tune up occasionally just to make sure. The key here is to just always keep your ears open. As you kind of play more, you'll get better at telling when your instrument is out of tune. You know, sounds a bit weird. We just want to make sure we're in tune properly. Otherwise it'll sound a bit odd and everything will be out of place as you start using the left hand and fretting things. So yeah, that's kind of the first point. Keep it in tune. If we're in tune, we're good to go. Cool, so as I said, we're going to take this nice and slow, really start basic here. And the way I tend to teach playing the banjo is that we start with like very, very kind of exaggerated motions. So this right hand is what we're talking about first. So let's do it bit by bit. Firstly, posture is important. You want to be sitting up straight, back straight, shoulders level. We don't want to be too hunched up or like at an angle or whatever. Nice and straight like this. Banjo between our legs. If you've played guitar at all before, you're probably used to having it on a leg, or classical guitar is on the left leg. It goes right between the legs. This kind of helps keep it in place, like this. You'll notice that the banjo is a little bit neck heavy, so it will naturally kind of fall a little bit like this, but having it here will just keep it in place a little bit better. That will actually be quite important when we get onto the left hand stuff, but for now, right hand. Cool, so what we're going to do, this arm, we want to rest it. Some people will have an armrest here. We want to rest it on that basically, kind of the middle of the forearm-ish. Everybody's different, everybody's hands and arms are different sizes, so it's not an exact science at all, but somewhere kind of around here we want this to be resting here. It's quite important as well to have the neck up like this. We don't want it too far down. We don't want to have it pointing to the sky directly. It's kind of at this angle, a generally kind of 45-degree angle. I also have the neck pointing forwards a little bit, but not massively, so not like this. I don't think it's good to have it pointing back like this. A little bit like that. Right, so now that we are seated comfortably, let's get on to the right hand. So if we get our right hand like this, we just hold it like that, and we relax our wrist and our hand completely, we basically get this. This is not quite what we want. We do want to keep super relaxed whilst we play clawhammer banjo, but we're not completely relaxed like this. This is too floppy, completely ineffectual. There's no control there. What we want to do is straighten it so the wrist is straight with the forearm. Imagine that there's a kind of metal bar almost going from here to this knuckle here on the little finger. Now, it's not tense. We're not holding it in place in a tense way. That will ruin our style. We want to keep it relaxed, but generally in place. So when we do play, there'll be a little kind of movement in the wrist, but not much. It's kind of a minimal thing, but it will take a while to understand exactly where the balance is. Everyone's slightly different. It's hard to just explain it in words, and even just to show it, we're all slightly different. You'll get used to it. generally speaking, the wrist is holding it in place. So also make sure it's straight this way. So not this way, not that way, straight like that, straight like that. So it's this kind of position. What we do want to keep super relaxed though is the fingers and the thumb on our right hand. Although it's called Clawhammer, we're not holding it in this kind of claw shape. We're not Chandler Bing from Friends in that episode when he plays too much arcade games. We want to keep it in a very natural and relaxed position. So for me, if I got the wrist straight and I completely relax the muscles in my fingers and my thumb, this is the position that it kind of automatically takes. This is, you know, it's like I'm holding a hammer. I'm not holding it in place like this. I'm not holding my fingers like this. I'm not tensing them. You can see how, you know, the muscles and the tendons on the back of my hand are tensed here. Completely relaxed. And that's the position it naturally takes. That's how we want to hold our hand when we're playing Clawhammer Banjo. This muscle is holding our wrist straight, this way as well. But our fingers and our thumb are completely relaxed like this. What we want to do after that, to start off with, is a very wide motion. It's actually quite exaggerated compared to what this movement will eventually become in the right hand. So we're moving, it's this joint here that we're moving our entire hand with, and I'll just show you a bit like this. So what's happening here is the backs of my fingers are going through the strings. For now, we're not being particular. It could be any of the fingers. It's probably quite a few. It's probably these three fingers are hitting it when I'm doing it right now. Just hitting all the strings. We're not trying to be super accurate. We're not trying to do anything other than hit the strings with the back of our fingernails. What is super important when we do this is when we come down, that thumb is resting on that top string there. This is the slightly shorter string here, the G string. And we want that thumb to come down and rest on it. So what's happening is my hand is so relaxed, and this is doing all the movement for now, that we get that kind of motion. The hand comes down, goes through the strings, continues past the strings. We don't want to be stopping midway so we're still on top of the strings. We want to go clear past it. And the hand opens up slightly simply because the hand is so relaxed, the thumb is so relaxed that the fingers move past it and the thumb gets caught basically on that top string. So we get that kind of, this motion. And you'll notice for now, very wide motion from the right hand elbow. So as I said before, we're not at this point worried about accuracy. We can actually be pretty sloppy really with this technique when we're practicing at this point. So this hand, if need be, it can actually be touching the head of this banjo for quite a bit. That kind of motion, you'll notice that kind of scraping noise. That's not a big deal for now. It is important to get that thumb resting on there. So if we need to make sure that it's doing it by basically audibly hitting the banjo head, no problem whatsoever. The banjo is kind of, well, Clawhammer banjo is kind of an inherently kind of sloppy instrument, particularly to start off with. It gets more accurate over time, but to start off with, we just don't care about accuracy whatsoever. We just kind of go for it quite robustly, like this. If we take it a bit slower, we get this. And you'll notice on the way up, I don't come down and then lift my thumb like this. The thumb actually stays on there until the hand gets to this point, and then it pulls up. This is a very subtle thing that people get caught up on to start off with, but it's actually quite important because it keeps the flow, the motion, the feel of Clawhammer Banjo on point. We don't want to be bringing that thumb up like that. We want to be letting it stay there whilst we come up. So this is basically what you want to start with practicing. Just do this for a while. Not super fun to start off with, but that's just how instruments are. You have to kind of get over the initial kind of struggle of getting that technique right. Clawhammer Banjo really is just two movements. It's just down, up, down, up, down, up. Even though that's super simple, it's a little bit unintuitive. The banjo is such a unique instrument. Clawhammer Banjo is such an odd style, really, compared to most Western ways of playing most instruments, that it does take a little bit of getting used to. But if you just practice this for a bit, oop, completely missed it there. This for a bit, not worrying about accuracy, just going for the feel of it. We want to make sure to start off with that this is the motion. It's from the elbow. So we don't want to see this. We don't want to see this. We want to see that. And each time we go back down, the thumb comes off, comes back down, off, back down. Because, and this is where we get to the second bit, we want to add in a thumb pluck at some point. So we come down, like this. Those are the two motions available basically to us on the banjo. And this thumb pluck, just like the downstroke, does take a little bit of work, so we'll look at it in a little bit more detail. What is happening here is, I'll say what isn't happening first actually. I'm not going down, pluck, up, down, pluck, up. I am not doing that. I cannot be emphatic enough on that point. That is not what we're doing. If I were to be doing that, that would mean there are now 3 motions in the clawhammer style. We want to keep it to 2. So I'm not going 1, 2, 3. So I'm not plucking down. I'm also not plucking out, really. Some people do this when I start teaching them. Down, out, up. Again, 3 motions. We don't want 3 motions, we want 2. That pluck happens on the way up. And it's a kind of subtle technique here, and it can be difficult to start off with to choose when not to and when to play that thumb pluck, because sometimes it starts off a little bit too subtle, and sometimes we just can't stop doing it, but that's fine. Again, to start off with, not about accuracy, it's about feel, it's about getting the general style. The way this thumb pluck works isn't, as I said, as a pluck in and of itself, as a kind of extra motion. And this is where the subtlety of it kind of comes in. The thumb just kind of gets caught on the way up, kind of goes behind the string a little bit. There's almost a little twist of the wrist. Everyone's different. You're going to have to work out how it suits your playing, basically. But there's a kind of little twist, gets caught, we come up, and then we pluck. This is just going to take a bit of practice, so don't worry if at first you find it really bemusing and strange. It is. It is bemusing and strange. Playing an instrument always is at first. It's not intuitive. I always tell people we don't really play instruments, particularly like the banjo, in nature. It's just not what, Homo sapiens naturally did when we first came about. So yeah, don't worry about finding it hard. There is a reason why we need to practice it. It's because it's weird and unnatural. So this is what I want you to take away from this kind of first proper lesson for clawhammer banjo. We have 2 motions. Practice them one at a time to start off with. Really just practice the downstroke to start off with. Down, 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 down. Now, where you play precisely on the banjo isn't the most important thing in the world. We can play at different points along the strings. I would recommend to start off with, you want to be aiming around this logo. Most banjos have a logo or something written here. If you don't, it's basically the first, I guess, like 2 or 3 inches into the head of the banjo from the neck. You can play the banjo down here, and you can play it all the way up here, really. They have different tones. It kind of sounds a bit richer and darker here, whereas this is a bit brighter and twangier. There's nothing wrong with that, but to start off with, aim for here, around here. You'll get the kind of best of both worlds, and it's just a little bit easier for the position of your hand to start off with. So yeah, this is our first motion, down. Make sure that your thumb is resting on that top string. Make sure the movement is from your elbow. And just do this. And if sometimes on the way up, you can hear that I'm doing it a little bit there, a little bit of that top string rings out, it's not a problem. It sometimes just happens. Again, the banjo is not a perfect instrument. Our style is not really a perfect one. There will be a little bit of sloppiness in there. That's perfectly fine. It usually gets lost in the mix of everything anyway when we're actually playing. So down, up, down, up, down, up. I'm intuitively doing the pluck. I don't want to do the pluck right now. I'm just trying to do the downstroke. Down, up, down, up, down, up. Again, there's a little bit of movement to this wrist when we come down, but it's really just staying generally in place. We're not floppy like this. We're not rigid either. It's kind of in between, so there's a little bit of movement, but not tons. The muscles in my hand, the fingers, and my thumb, they are super relaxed, so that is the natural position of them. I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but these are important things to really kind of make sure that we understand. And after practicing that for a while, we can add in the thumb pluck, and that really is just part of that same upwards movement. Down, up, down, up. There's a sort of subtle twist of the wrist to make sure that we kind of get behind the string a bit and pop. we're kind of popping it out, but the important thing here is that the pop or pluck, the thumb pluck, whatever we want to call it, is not a separate motion. It isn't down, pluck, up. That's 3 motions. And again, apologies for repeating myself, but it's super important. We want 2 motions on the banjo. Down, up, down, up, down, up. Over time, you'll get better at kind of choosing how dynamically you're playing this, you know, at what volume the pluck is occurring. Or louder. And over time, we can do different things with tempo. We can move things around quite a lot. It is a versatile instrument, but we want to get the basics right, and we really want to take our time with this. So I would recommend, off the back of this first lesson, just doing this for a while. It's not necessarily the most fun thing in the world, but we really just want to make sure we got this right. Down, up, down, up. Make sure the thumb rest is happening. Make sure the hand is relaxed, the wrist is straight but not tense. I know that this is just kind of a bunch of instructions at you, and they can seem a little bit counterintuitive or contradictory at points. You know, we want to keep the wrist in place, but we're not tense and the hand is... You will get used to it, and the only way you can get used to it, though, is by just playing it. So really just go away and do this, and you'll get it right. But again, to repeat myself, I cannot overstress enough the importance of posture. Getting the right position, keeping your hand here, this kind of portion resting on the banjo. You might have an armrest here that is going to really be a strong guide to where you're playing. A brief note on that, actually. Some people end up keeping their arms here or all the way around here. It is this area. It's a kind of, I guess you might call that the 9 o'clock to kind of 12 o'clock position, somewhere between that bit if it was a clock face. I don't know if that's helpful. Hopefully it is. So yeah, just go away and practice that kind of thing. You will get it eventually. And the more you just do this to start off with, and then add the thumb pluck in, the more quickly you'll be able to move on to doing other things. And the more quickly we'll be able to get onto left-hand stuff, playing chords, things like that, and slightly more sophisticated patterns with this right hand. But basically, that's it. There are 2 movements on the banjo when it comes to our right hand. That's the thing you need to remember. Down and up. Down and up. And that's it. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you in the next lesson.